At the edge of a quiet forest sat an ivy-covered cottage, home to a household defined by a sharp divide. A widowed mother doted on her elder daughter, Clarice, while treating the younger, Marianne, as little more than a servant. Clarice was indulged in every vanity and excused for every cruelty. Meanwhile, Marianne spent her days in constant labor, fetching water, scrubbing floors, and mending the very lace her sister wore. Despite the constant verbal barbs from her mother, Marianne remained patient. She met every harsh word with a soft answer, using kindness to protect her own sense of peace. This diagram shows how that inner state functions. By refusing to mirror the hostility thrown at her, Marianne is able to neutralize the impact of the abuse, keeping her core identity separate from her environment. The limits of this composure were tested when a summer heatwave dried up the local water. Marianne's mother ordered her to walk a mile to a distant well, carrying a heavy jug through the shimmering heat. Intense physical exhaustion often functions as a revealing force. It strips away social performance, showing the raw character that remains when a person is pushed to their physical limit. Marianne reached the well with trembling arms. Before she could rest, an old woman in tattered clothes appeared, asking for a drink to quench her thirst in the fierce sun. Despite her own fatigue, Marianne immediately drew fresh water, rinsed her jug, and held it carefully for the stranger. She spoke with the same sweetness she offered her family, even without the pressure of their presence. The beggar revealed her true form, a fairy who had been testing the girl's heart. She saw that Marianne's kindness was pure instinct. As a gift, the fairy decreed that every word Marianne spoke would manifest as a flower or a precious jewel, falling from her lips as a physical sign of her character. The spell functioned as a mirror. The jewels and blooms were simply the physical evidence of the internal beauty Marianne had cultivated long before she reached the well. Virtue reveals itself most clearly in small, anonymous moments. When there is no audience and no promise of reward, the choice to be helpful defines the person. When Marianne returned home, dropping diamonds and roses, her mother's greed took over. She immediately sent Clarice to the same well, demanding she bring back an even greater fortune. Clarice walked the path with visible irritation. She viewed the labor of fetching water as an insult to her status, only agreeing to go because of the promise of the diamonds. This time, the fairy appeared as a beautiful princess. She asked Clarice for a drink, testing whether the girl would show the same respect to a superior that Marianne had shown to a beggar. Clarice snapped at the princess, telling her to draw her own water. She refused to act as a servant to a stranger, her voice dripping with the same pride she used at home. The fairy's curse mirrored Clarice's response. From that moment on, every word she spoke would manifest as a slithering snake or a croaking toad. Both sisters faced the same environmental input, a mile-long walk and a request for water. The difference in the output, the jewels versus the toads, was determined entirely by the internal filter each sister applied to the situation. Because Clarice's actions were driven only by the hope of a payout, her interaction with the fairy turned toxic. When the expected reward was replaced by a request for service, her underlying hostility was laid bare. Back at the cottage, Clarice's first words filled the room with vermin. Snakes and toads spilled onto the floor, driving the mother into a panic. Unable to face the consequences of her favorite daughter's nature, the mother blamed Marianne instead, violently casting her out into the woods. While wandering the forest, Marianne encountered a prince returning from a hunt. As she explained her sorrow, lilies and pearls fell with every soft word she uttered. The prince saw the value of the gems, but he was more struck by the honesty and grace of the woman speaking them. He took her to the palace, where her kindness eventually made her a beloved queen. The family left behind faced a different end. Clarice was shunned, while her mother spent her final days alone among cold, worthless jewels. The words we choose to speak act as a force that shapes our surroundings. While unearned wealth eventually loses its luster, the habits of a gentle heart provide a foundation for a life that remains in bloom.